We are joined by Mr. Samir K. Purkayastha. He's Associate Editor, The Federal. Mr. Purkayastha, welcome to News9 Live. Thank you for being with us. Mr. Purkayastha, we have been covering Manipur for almost 3 months now, much before the crisis start and the political crisis, which looked like engulfing the state of Manipur, and especially Chief Minister N. Biren Singh when Kuki MLAs went to Delhi. Trying to reach out to the BJP central leadership and saying that there should be change. And ever since, Manipur has been in a downward spiral of violence, which you're saying. One important angle which has been covered by one of the Hindi national daily, which puts the spotlight to something which the Spear Corps had given some time back. The role of Meira Paibis. And it's a very important and interesting discussion, which I think by after going through that, we felt like that this should be discussed, come what may, because the Spear Corps in their tweet, if you see this 24th of June visual, it's very clear that that the Indian Army had to write that they are humane, but this is what was witnessed, that women folks were accompanying armed rioters and how they forced the police to free the KYKL leaders, especially one who was charged of killing an army jawan before that. How do you see the role of Meira Paibis, Mr. Samir Purkayastha, if you go by, the kind of active support they are leading to people on the ground who are carrying this fight?
See, in Manipur, in any sorts of protest or agitation, Meira Paibis has always taken pivotal role, and they are at the forefront always. And even in this time of crisis, Meira Paibis are not only confronting the security forces, they are actively supporting village volunteers in what they call putting up resistance against attacks from other sides. They are on the roads. They are checking vehicles. Vehicular movements are regularly checked by them. If you want to go from valley to the hills, you'll find lots of checkpoints manned by Meira Paibis. Similarly, on the other side also, the Kuki women are in the forefront. So in Northeast, you see the women in the front, they take very active part in agitations, in all sorts of political movement, whatever. And this time also, Meira Paibis are playing very active role. And their confrontations with the security forces natural, because Meira Paibis and security forces have, trust deficit from this trust deficit goes back to several decades. So, if you remember, during this counterinsurgency operation, they were at the forefront protesting against atrocities against women by the security forces.
Yes.
So this has been there has been a history to this, long history to this. But this time, in certain cases, like their role, particularly from the opposite side, their role has been questioned. And particularly, there are allegations that Meira Paibis helped hand over few Kuki women to the volunteers from Methi communities. We don't know how far these allegations are true. This needed to be investigated, but there are these kind of allegations are also there. But having said so, see, it's not these confrontations and the way they are confronting with the security forces is it's extension of the role they had been playing in the society. And it's not only Meira Paibis. Yesterday in More, this incident took place when security forces were attacked. There also the Kuki woman took a very active part in that, in that kind of resistance or confrontation with the security forces. So women from both sides are now at the forefront in this confrontation. Not only the Meira Paibis, even the Kuki women are also putting up the resistance from their side. They are also manning checkposts. So, so women from both sides are playing very active role. And in the days to come, as there are, this uh, there are chances that if this crisis lingered, then the people in general will take harder stands against Indian state. And there are already some talks about revival of this merger agreement with India. This demand for revisiting merger agreement with India has already been raised by some organizations. So, in the days to come, this confrontation will only aggravate if this crisis is not immediately, handled or addressed.
Okay, okay, that's a very lucid explanation of how things are panning out. And for our viewers, we would like to say that Meira Paibis, also known as mothers of Manipur, are Maiti women who come from all sections of society in the Imphal Valley. They are widely respected and represent a powerful moral force. They're loosely organized, usually led by groups of senior women, but have no rigid hierarchy or structure. And they were formed in 1977, and they're one of the largest grassroots movement in the world. Initial focus on fighting alcoholism and drug abuse, and now expanding to countering human rights violations and development of society at large. And over the decades, the Meira Paibis have led numerous social and political movements in the state, including some powerful protests against alleged atrocities by Indian security forces, leveraging their strong position in the society in the interest of the causes they have espoused. But this time, their situation has, the army was forced to, if my viewers are visiting this incident which happened in Yangang, Popki, which is in Imphal West, where the Spear Corp had to put out a tweet where they said that thousands of women had surrounded them, and this is the reason why they had to let go of hardened militants, mighty militants, and including one which was accused of killing an army Jawan some a decade or 8 years, 10 years back. Mr. Dongle, you've seen the report. There's this report, and as Mr. Purkayastha very eloquently put, that it's not only Meira Paibis who are stopping the armed forces from carrying out their duties, their attempt to make sure that the law and order is checked, their identity cards are checked by Meira Paibis, their intention is checked, and usually a kind of atmosphere is created where the army can't open fire or can't lathi charge such a massive gathering of women. Do you think what do you make of this current situation? Whereas the army hand is forced by women groups in Manipur.
Brijesh ji, please allow me to, come to your question a little later, because you have put out a bite of Bunjagin Walte, and I'd like to make a small comment on that one. We have seen how Bunjagin Walte, who was the chief minister advisor in his cabinet. Yeah, advisor to the chief minister. On that fateful night, intervening night, he was with the chief minister. He had a talk, and I think Letpao Haukip, he is also a minister of tribal affairs in Biren Singh government. He was also present. And while they were returning, this incident happened. And Bunjagin Walte, as you have said, testification of his own son that his father was, and also beaten black and blue. Led out the minister house was also attacked, and then in the process, despite several attempts to reach out to the chief minister did not respond to the stress call from the one of his minister, that is Mr. Lepao, and his entire property house were destroyed in Imphal. And you also see later in the month of May, the house of Mrs. Nemcha, he's also a minister in Chief Minister Biren Singh's cabinet. Minister, yet his quarter in Imphal was also razed to the ground. So all of these things, the ministers are not safe. That is why the common people today, the Kuki Joe people today feel ministers are not safe. If those in power are not safe, then who are we? Therefore, the protest or otherwise the hankering for separate administration is on the rise. And yes, coming back to your question on regarding the role of women in Manipur, there are instances wherein we have seen the Meira Paibis have used their like I said in my earlier presentation also, how they that they will take off their clothes if the army did not comply to the request. So they have weaponized nakedness or use it as a weapon to curtail the combing operation and the law and order process to take its due course. So today there was instance yesterday wherein in Sapomena in Kampupi district there were involvement of Kuki women and also the civilians, the local people burning down 2 buses in Kampupi district. Now I will not be surprised to say that the role of Meira Paibis and how they have camouflaged the idea or camouflage the violence atrocities committed by the Meitei terrorists or otherwise the Rambai Tengon and Meitei put in the valley, that having spillover effect on the Kukis or otherwise the women belonging to the Kuki Joe community in particular. So when they realize that this is the right weapon or otherwise the right way to defend their territory or otherwise their area by condoning of the army forces or the paramilitary forces to take actions, I think the same has been realized by the Kuki Joe community that if women are in the forefront, then I think to a certain extent we can have
Mr. Dongal, but Mr. Dongal, you just listened to Mr. Samir Purkayastha. He said that the same trick is also being adopted by Kuki women also because of something which happened yesterday. So I'm just trying to understand because usually place from where I come from, this is not that heard of. The women being at the forefront of fighting the security forces. Even the Kuki women are doing that. Mr. Samir Purkayastha just told us. So how do you assess that situation?
Yeah, thank you. Since the time the violence erupted in the state of Manipur from the month of May, early May, we have seen just one instance wherein the Kuki Joe women were involved. That was yesterday. And in fact, it's not just the women, civilians, the local people, alongside the women, Kuki Joe women in in Kampupi district. That's one instance that we have seen. Whereas you see, there are several other instances, more grave in nature, the involvement of Meira Paibis in the valley. We have seen how the Meira Paibis have said to their men to go and rape Kuki women. Yeah, there is a video on record, and also how 12 terrorists were released because of the involvement of the Meira Paibis in condoning of the army to take necessary action against the terrorists who were caught. So look at the involvement. If you look at the involvement and also the modus operandi, both adopted by both the so-called, in comparison, the Meira Paibis and also the Kuki Joe women, we see, anybody who is rational or right-thinking human being can point out who actually is, propagating violence or otherwise shielding atrocities to take place without abatement, in their own area. So, in that sense, Kuki women, Joe women involvement is minuscule. It's minor.
Minuscule.
In that sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And wait, let me come back to one point that we talk about
I will, I will, I
major
will, I will, I
general
will get back to you.
and
I will get back to you, Mr. Dongle. We give enough time for our guests to respond to their heart's content. We don't impose our views, or we don't love to cut our guest short and all. We're also joined by Dr. Haukep. Dr. Haukep, welcome to News9 Live. Always good to have you here. Dr. Haukep, there was a video which was released by Spare Cop on 24th or 25th of June, last month, where they talked about how they were surrounded by large gathering of women, and they forced the army to release 12 KL militants, and including one who was accused of killing an army guy. The role of Meira Paibis have also come into question about how they are forcing the Indian army. They're checking their identity cards, or they are ensuring that that they're not able to operate as freely as they would like to. A very leading Hindi newspaper has done a ground report from Imphal as well as More, where they have illustrated about how the security forces are now saying that they need more women Jawans to counter them. How do you describe the role of Meira Paibis, Dr. Haukep?
I don't need to talk much about the Meira Paibis anymore, because for the last almost 2 months we have been discussing, and there are many reports about them in newspapers, in television channels. So I don't have to talk much more about that. But in order that the armed forces do their work, as we all know, there are thousands of arms being given away, handed away to radical groups. This has been the worry. The armed, personals, for instance, the commanders, those who have led Manipur in the past as DGP and others, they are so worried about this arms that has been into the public hand, the radical groups. And people are not talking much, or the government's not talking much about this, how to recover them. And the only way to recover all these arms is to empower the armed forces, and that reimposing AFSPA for a few months is the only way. And we have been suggesting for the last many months, more than 2 months now, that reimpose AFSPA for a few months, so that there is peace and normalcy returning in the state. And that has been not listened by anyone in Delhi or in any elsewhere. So what do we have now? We have a situation where uh, earlier we have a situation where the armed forces are said to be having impunity. Now it's the women folks, it's the people, it's the people who are having impunity over what to say, how to demonize others, how to cross-check the duty of armed forces in doing their duty. So this is a very sad situation, and it's very glaring. I don't have to say much more about this, and it has been in place for the last 2.5 months. So, in order that peace and order returns in this state, there is a need to reinforce, or there is a need for urgent reimposition of SPA, so that the armed forces can do their own work without any partiality. And we all know the disparity between the hills and valley, where in the hill areas, all the insurgent groups, including the Nara insurgent groups, they have signed suspension of operation, and they are undergoing peace talks, and they are functioning under the law of this land. While on the other hand, you have the valley-based insurgent groups who are operating in Myanmar, but now they are mostly in the valley now. And without this, power by the armed forces, they cannot handle all this, unrest in the valley. So we have to deeply look into it, into the security point. Whenever my colleagues and my friends from the valley, uh, we discuss about this, they will always divert about all these issues. But the reality is that there is so much impunity in the valley that they don't have any, they don't have any thing to think about it. They can just say whatever is in their mind, whether it is about demonizing, otherizing the minorities, particularly the Kukis, saying that they are immigrants, they're coming from Myanmar. They all know. But this is a kind of politics where you try to divert the kind of political demands that the hill people have been had met for the last many years. And when we talk about political talks should precede peace, then they would always say that that is the ultimate goal. But who started all this kind of demonization, othering, calling the minorities as immigrants, poppy cultivators, without talking about who are the drug traffickers, who are financing them, where does corruption lies, where does the lion's share of the kind of funding that Delhi gives to this state, because Manipur is a special category state. 90% of the funds came from Delhi, and all this money are spent mostly in the valley in the form of institutional building like universities, colleges, administrative staff, and other things. If you look into Manipur, then you would also see all those institutions building up in Far Valley only. On the other hand, in the hills, you hardly have roads where you could go safely to the district or even other places. There are no primary health centers, for instance, like in the Hinglip or in Kingsoy or other places. You don't have the schools, the minimal schools that are needed for poor villagers in the hill areas to be educated. So in such areas, people do practices so many things like doing the minimal farming, zooming cultivation, and others to make their livelihood. And this zooming cultivation is look upon as something that destroys environment, because this zooming is practiced for thousands of years by the indigenous people, and it has been sustainable for long, and the debate is long gone in the last many decades that as we have perceived in the last many decades, zooming is not as destructive to the environment as it has been perceived. So different kind of academic discussions are coming up. Many policies are being driven up in Nagaland to change into the outlook of this zoom cultivation, because these hill states, they don't have any plain areas where you have paddy fields